Just move that chair out the way, that way it's good.
Well, that's good there. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. And then I will connect it. Guess it's good. Okay. First off, if anybody doesn't have the TCC academic calendar with the dates that the school is closed and holidays and withdrawal dates, and hopefully no one's withdrawing already, enrollment dates, it is out there and I like to upload it to our announcement page. So when I have an announcement for all of you, I will post it here on the announcement page. That's where everything's going to go. So if I send you an email, I also get a copy. And if you think, oh, I can't get to my email by chance on your phone or what have you, just go to the announcements page, and everything I need you to know, I try and post right here. There's a link to the syllabus here, video, as you've all seen. Okay, over here, this is mine, let me show you. If I click this, then I can see what you see. And you don't have all the tabs that I have. But I'm going to remove this tab because you've all signed in to the course room and I don't like to confuse anybody. So this link right here is what gets you into the course room. This, of course, gets us into PACBAC. We'll look at that later. And this is my syllabus if you need it, and it's working right. And this one here is an attachment that TCC likes to include. And it's good to go to if you have any of those questions that relate to HR, or especially if you have to be absent for quite a length of time. You want to go and check that out. But you each have an advisor. And I think your advisor is your first point of contact. And they can direct you. But quite a few things on here. And they've had that for the past few years, like 3 years that I can think of. Yeah. Each week on Sunday, I will send you your lesson plan, which is up there. Ooh, that's small. My eyes like there. So you'll get that on Sunday. I try and post it before 3 o'clock. And it lets you know what we're going to be going over in the class each week and the chapter. This is all focused on Chapter 1, the rise of culture from forest to farm. Sometimes in that middle column there where it says assessment methods, sometimes I will have sections 2, 3, and 4 only, and I've removed the section 1 quiz, or the section 3 or the section 4, because I want to replace it with something else. Or some chapters have 5 sections. Every now and then, there's a section that I'll take out. Depends on the chapter. And sometimes, where it says the Rebel chapter quiz, there may be a time when I take out the chapter quiz because I want to focus on a project or something. So you always want to check that lesson plan Sunday when you log in to see what do I need to really focus on here. PACBAC, critical thinking question. I'm really big on critical thinking, analyzing things. We'll practice composing a question in PACBAC, maybe each week. It depends. If you have 5 sections in your text, or I say textbook, but you don't need online text, and a chapter quiz, sometimes I pull back a little bit. I try and be sensitive to my students and the loads that you carry, because a lot of us, hey, when you get to community college, yes, we do have some concurrent enrollment students, but most of us are working. That's hard to juggle. I know, I remember. I have not forgotten.
Thank you.
And then this question here, that's what this topic here, discussion question for next Monday, January 31st. And this is just something I want you to think about at the end of each week when we finish a chapter. Because that next Monday when we come together, I want us to share, what did you learn in that chapter last week that you didn't know before? Or something that was interesting or fascinating or wow, that wow moment, like, who knew? Over here on the left, right, my military right. As a class, we always review lesson plan, chapter outline. I like to go through that really quick so you get an idea in one fell swoop of what's in the chapter and what it looks like. That helps me. I hated outlines in high school because I didn't know how to do them. And then once I got to college and I learned college, and I learned how to do an outline, I thought, wow, man, that could have been so much easier. But it really helps you see things, broken down. I teach English literature. Yeah, I'm really annoying now. But I love it. Chapter images. I always attach that to the email each Sunday, as well as the outline. All three of these items here, lesson plan, chapter outline, and the chapter with images, I attach to your announcement each Sunday. And Michael asked about the flashcards. When we get into the textbook online, I'll show you where that is. They moved it. I have to go find it. So hopefully I'll fall right into it again this time. They do that. I don't know. Maybe somebody's at Rebel going, let's see if they can find it this time. Let's play. I know flashcards. Because last year, if not the year before, I thought, wait, where did they put them? But I found them. Your section quizzes and chapter test quiz. I think they're trying to psych you out calling it a chapter quiz. Chapter test quiz. Those are all, of course, completed in Rebel. When we do our unit exams, let me go ahead and throw that out there. I do not do like cumulative in terms of, okay, here's your chapters 1 through 5 unit exam. And I'm going to ask you 20,000 questions from every chapter. I just don't believe in that, me. So what I do is I'll pull a couple questions from each chapter and I'll tell you what chapter those questions are in, and we take that unit exam like that. And they've got a new program online, so we'll try it the first time. I tried it last semester. And the semester before, it didn't roll very well, so I just said, forget it. And we did it the old-fashioned way. Here's a hard copy. They took it. I had it been graded by the time the students left and added in. Didn't have to wait on Rebel. So we'll see how this new program goes. It looks like it's going to be cooperative.
Okay. So the unit questions, are they multiple choice questions, or are they
Which ones?
You said a unit exam?
No. They're
Essays. Okay.
essay style questions.
Okay.
Yeah, multiple choice. Yeah.
Why are you
Who
laughing?
learns from multiple choice?
I do.
No, you think you do. You like multiple choice?
I do.
Oh my, okay.
I'm old. I learned something to
the
jog my
quizzes-
memory.
The section quizzes and the chapter quiz / test, whatever, you'll be right at home. You'll be right at home. But when it gets to the unit,
Just not on the unit test.
then I get to see what you really know. And think.
What would you say?
We actually have to learn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How dare All right. I usually love showing the film Alpha. Has anyone ever seen the movie Alpha? Alpha? See, nobody's ever seen that. And I am looking here, and they have removed the DVD player from this classroom, and I'm not happy though. Yeah, what do you do though? Because I thought, no, now I can't show the DVD because it goes so perfect with this chapter on the Paleolithic and Neolithic era. So, not happy. Maybe next week. No, that'll be
Is it
Mesopotamia.
YouTube?
It could be. So I'll check it when we go on break, which reminds me, somebody needs a break, Sean. Like, until somebody say, hey, break,
When is break?
like
You
10,
can't tell.
because I will keep going and rolling and rolling. All right, so past the lesson plan here, let's look at the chapter outline. Actually, I'm gonna flip over here. I said this is the other document that I attached to your announcement page. And this is the PowerPoint, the PDF of it, that shows pictures, all the pictures that are in the book. So if when I travel, I'm looking at architecture and buildings and stuff like that. That's me. And so this stuff is right up my alley, not so much these paintings, but I love history. I feel like I am history, history is me. So just click through that really quick. We'll come across those pictures again in our textbook. And I'll jump over here to the outline. Totally amazing. Okay, again, I try and help you see the chapter broken down. And this first part here, I've highlighted a few things, and you may have seen it. I'm talking louder for the video. Why is she yelling? For a reason. Not angry. The rise of culture from forest to farm. This is one of the most interesting chapters. It's not my favorite chapter, but it is one of the most interesting because it really captures the essence of this textbook. Like I said in the video, this textbook shows you different places around the world, what's happening in the same time period. I've taught history for years, and this is when they first handed me this textbook. I looked at it and I said, "Ooh, this is nerdy. A nerdy history person. Ooh, this is really cool." And I love the setup. I had never seen a book set up that way before. Anyway, I won't be redundant and repeat what I said in the video. So first we're going to focus on from forest to farm. Does anyone know what that means, from forest to farm? What comes to your mind when you think the rise of culture from forest to farm? Anyone?
Going from like Stone Ages to agriculture, the way they got their food and stuff like
Yes,
that.
if you've been reading ahead, good for you. Okay. But yes, it talks about how most people groups were hunters and gatherers. Hunters and gatherers. They went out and they hunted for what they need. They went into the forest and gathered what they needed in terms of vegetation. But then there came a point as they grew and expanded their culture, they began to plant and farm. Think, hey, wait a minute. If we farm and we plant our own vegetables and we plant our own things, or we create farms, with whatever livestock, wherever they lived in the world, whatever livestock was around, then we won't have to go all the way and leave home for weeks at a time on long hunts. We have it right here. And in addition to that, they began to share with other communities. And that's what it means from the forest to the farm. It focuses on the beginnings of culture in the Paleolithic era. Each chapter, we're going to see what different cultures have in common. Anyone want to take a guess what some of the things that every culture in the world has in common? Well, let me clarify that. Let's go back in time. In the beginning, when civilizations were being formed, what are some things that you think every culture, no matter where it was located on the face of the earth?
Trade.
Huh?
Trade.
Trade. Yes. They figured that out.
Hunting and gathering.
Hunting, yeah.
Hunting.
Well, hunting, yeah. Okay, what else do you think every culture had in common? And still, if I said today, what does every culture have in common?
Rituals,
Yes, some
Establishing
form of
society.
worship. What?
Establishing a society.
Establishing society or government.
government.
Establishing government, which leads me to manifest destiny. Has everyone heard of manifest destiny? Especially in America. When I hear people talk about manifest destiny, usually they're angry. In America, manifest destiny. They took the land, and I point out to people, since I teach world history and not everybody does or knows it, I say, you really can't find a culture that didn't believe in manifest destiny. You're going to see it in Japan. You're going to see it in China. You're going to see it in Africa. You're going to see it in Europe. You're going to see it in the Celtic system. You're going to see it everywhere where peoples believe. There's one culture in a certain group of people that believe they were destined to rule, and they try and kill the other people. It's in every culture. Egypt, my goodness gracious. Mesopotamia. Okay. Some other things that every culture had in common: art, music. You're going to see that every culture had music in common. Oh, war. That's at the top of the list, actually. What every culture has in common. As we go through this book, I challenge you to find a chapter, maybe the last 2 chapters when we're coming out of the Middle Ages into the Renaissance, and you're not going to see war. People are getting a little more into the universities. They're educating themselves, and they're going, hey, let's try to live at peace. That's not everywhere, but Europe was getting there. What else? Slavery. That's right up there with war, because you have a lot of cultures trying to conquer another culture, or people groups trying to conquer another people group, especially next week when we look at Mesopotamia. And they're conquering these countries. And as they're doing so, they're taking the people, scooping them up, and they're thinking, okay, what do we do with the people now? And they enslave them. But Mesopotamia, what were they? Babylonians, thank you. Like Nebuchadnezzar. But the Babylonians, they had this practice. When they conquered a nation, they would pick up the people and enslave them, and then they would take the people of that culture or country or group that they conquered, and they would scatter them across other nations as they traveled, so that the people couldn't come together and rise up against them. And that's how, well, we'll see when we get to Mesopotamia next week. And that's how you ended up with a lot of, next week we're going to look at Mesopotamia, and there's a section in there on Hebrews, how you have people who were Jewish scattered all over in different countries that was not Israel. Like, how did they get there? Because of Babylonia, or Babylon. Okay, so Paleolithic culture and its artifacts. Again, that's why I love that movie Alpha. And I'm going to try and pull it up, because you see all of this in terms of these tools here that I have highlighted. The cleavers, the chisels, the grinder. They're using these tools, and I can always go through that movie and say, oh, see, there's an example of this. There's an example of that. The caves. They bury their dead in ritual ceremonies, often laying them to rest, accompanied by stone tools and weapons. They made musical instruments. Their culture is growing. The rise of agriculture and community in the Neolithic era, coming out of the Paleolithic, the old Stone Age, into the new Stone Age. And here this section talks about the art and architecture reflecting the era's changing cultural concerns. So the ice is receding and the seas are rising, or they rose, and the ice receded and the seas rose. Agriculture began replacing hunting and gathering. That shift ushered in the new Stone Age. Animals, they started domesticating the animals. That's what I meant by, pigs and, well, horses hadn't come on the scene. Well, depends on where you were. Remember, we're going around the world. But in America, we know the horse was not here until who brought the horse over? Anybody? Going back to high school history? How did the horses what? Yes, but who specifically?
Native Americans.
No? Well, it was actually, he never made it here. Hint, hint. Yeah.
Columbus.
Columbus, yes. Yes, but he took them to South America, and I would guess the people at that time, but they brought them up through Central America into North America. So yes. These Neolithic communities, and see here where now this section is going to focus on Turkey and caves and different things that are in Turkey that we can look at, which is interesting here. This line right here is referring to Turkey way, way, way back when. And this statement says this was possibly a matrilineal culture. It is so anti-matrilineal now. Definitely very much male-dominated society in terms of women still having to dress a certain way and not having the same rights, as men in most parts of Turkey. Scarborough, Scotland. We're going to look and see how their houses were composed. Furniture was built into walls, and the only light would have come from the smoke hole above the hearth. The houses were made of stone. They used the corbelling technique with roofs of organic materials such as straw, thatched, or seaweed. The houses in the village were connected by a series of walkways. And this is representative of early North America in terms of the colonies. When not the Pilgrims, but I talked all day today, you all, sorry. And I was trying so hard not to. I talked all day and I thought I need to give my voice a rest. When they came over from England to Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, and they began to set up the colony, that's how they would lay things out. This is how they would build their houses. The furniture was built into walls. And they actually did this way into the 1800s. If you've ever been to Virginia, if you ever get to Virginia, anyone ever been to Virginia? No? And toured Thomas Jefferson's home or James Madison's home, some of those homes, but Jefferson's home, the furniture is built, things are built into the walls. And I thought, wow, they're still doing that. But in Scotland, that's where that originated. This part here, where is it? The roofs were made of organic materials such as straw, thatch, and seaweed. That phrase, it's raining cats and dogs. Does anyone know where that phrase came from? It's from back then because the animals would sleep on the roofs to stay warm, and if it rained really hard, yes, the mud would disintegrate and they'd fall through the roof.
Oh, wow.
And it's raining cats and dogs. I did not make that up. I looked it up, and that is the origin of that phrase. It goes back to that. So next week, what did you learn the most fascinating thing? Raining cats and dogs. Hopefully it's deeper than that. Pottery. Now it's jumping over to, in this section, to Jaman, and then to China. To look at their Neolithic societies where women made the pottery. Susa. Then we're in Africa, then Europe, then Egypt. Then it goes into focus on ceramic figures. And then Down here, this may be the Neolithic megaliths of Northern Europe. Now, Northern Europe, specifically here, is talking about the United Kingdom, which back then was referred to as Britain, and then it became Great Britain. Now it's the UK. But Stonehenge, if anyone's ever seen pictures of Stonehenge, they say it remains a mystery. But it's not so much a mystery to me. It seems clear that orientation toward the rising sun at the summer solstice connects it to planting and harvest. The Celts, I love Celtic history. I like reading about Celtic history, but the Celts were really big on their two gods, Samhain and Beltane, and especially their summer solstice being dedicated to him. And they were very, very creative people, very powerful people. So I've always been of the opinion that either the Celts or the Vikings, built Stonehenge. Because they both had this thing about the rising sun, or pointing things in the direction of the rising sun, but they weren't the only cultures. I like this, how it says these people were extremely social, capable of great cooperation, hence the trade. And they knew how to work together to get things done. And this section, the role of myth in cultural life. This may be one of the sections that kind of annoys me a little bit, because they talk about what is the function of myth in prehistoric culture. And they say a myth is a story that a culture assumes is true, and they try and equate different cultures' religion to myth, or referring to it as myth, which I think is a little, but that's just my opinion, disrespectful. The Anasazi and the role of myth. Now it jumps over to Native American Indian culture here. Jumps over to Colorado, and we see what are years, 900 to 1300 CE. Now, for those of you who are saying, what is CE, and you've never seen this book, you may know these terms as BC and then AD, but in newer historical textbooks and science textbooks, they're going with a new designation called BCE and CE. So when you see those, and you're like, wait, what is that? What does that mean? Just correlate BCE to BC and CE to AD. And it just means common error. Yes. Common error. Okay. Then the next group they're going to look at is Zuni Pueblo. The peoples of Americas developed agricultural societies and domesticated animals. It was also happening over here in Europe and the Americas and other places around the world. Somehow they got the memo out and people got the message. Hey, let's come out of the farm. Let's start farming. But they were all started to do it. Go figure. And domesticating animals at the same time. The Zuni Pueblo dance performances tell stories that relate to the experience of the Pueblo peoples, daily life, larger experiences, birth, puberty, maturity, death, origin of the world. I was just showing my history class a video of the Apache rite of passage for 15-year-old girls. I know in the Latino Hispanic community they have quinceañeros. When a girl turns 15, big party. You haven't seen anything. Compared to the Apache rite of passage for a 15-year-old girl. It's like the whole community comes together and they spend about $5,000 to $10,000 to have, yes. I see your mouth open through the mask.
Yeah.
For this girl, I know, how loved do you feel for this 15-year-old girl to have a rite of passage? But what you're seeing right there are things that happened during that rite of passage. And what's very interesting in that video is they share how, her grandfather shares how it wasn't until 1978 where it was legal for them to speak their own language and wear their traditional clothing and practice their ceremonies. It had been illegal all the way up to 1978.
Hmm.
Yeah, I thought, wow. Yes. So then it jumps over to Japan and the role of myth in the Shinto religion. And once we get to, maybe it's chapter 5, or it may be, where Japan and the dynasties, man, between the dynasties in Japan and the dynasties in China trying to kill each other off, I'm surprised that they survived. Yes, yes, because it was vicious. I mean, and it was all rooted in religion in terms of one believed in Confucianism and one believed in Buddhism. It was like, no, Buddhism, no, Confucianism. And whoever won the war, they would institute that religion. And when they were overthrown, then the other religion was instituted. So,
Oh,
I
wow.
saw a movie about that.
Really? Which one?
I really don't remember.
well, if it comes to you, share it. When we get to that
Yeah.
chapter, I'll pull it up.
I think it was kind of like a documentary. Or he
Well, this section here, kami, or gods, are the spirits that are embodied in the natural world. That's what the Japanese believe, that kami, or gods, embody things in the natural world, like trees, rocks, water, mountains. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Who else has that belief and practice?
Native American.
Native American Indians, yes. Native American Indians. And that's really interesting to me every time I get to this part, because that's how Native American Indians came to be in North America, was crossing over that Bering Strait hundreds of years ago from Asia into Alaska, down through Canada, and into what is now the United States. That was hundreds of years ago, hundreds, before Europe got there. And you also had people groups who immigrated up through Central America into what is Mexico, into the southern part of the United States. Yes, and the last section is sacred sites, examples of the Americas, and that focuses on the Olmecs. They'll come up again when we get to maybe chapter 10, which focuses on South America and Mexico, and and the Mayans and the Incans and the Aztecs and the Teotihuacans. That's the same. And then you have the Olmecs in Mexico. Then you've got the mound builders in Ohio and Illinois. Okay. So that is the outline, an overview of what's in the chapter. Introduction to, see if it kicks me out. Yeah. Okay. You may have to see if it kicked you out. So let's go over here now to the book. I'm like, wow. Let me tell you right now, you may think, oh, she's not funny. I know, I'm already aware. But let's see, which section shall we do? Like I said in the announcement, I like to try and do at least one section with my students and go through the quiz together, and hopefully sometimes two, depending. So the sacred sites section is very small. The role of myth in culture. Yeah, that's kind of. Let's see which one is the largest. Yes, okay. Let's do the rise of agriculture and community in the Paleolithic era. That's a long section. We can knock that. Okay. So section 2 starts with the ancient Near East, power and social order. If you need to search in the section or the chapter, you can always click up at the top there and search the content. Now, while I'm thinking about it, before I forget, over here. The rise of culture and community, that's where we think about it. Down here, Michael, and anyone else, under chapter review, if you click on that, okay, and you
Is
go
that-
down to the bottom.
Are you in chapter 2?
No, I'm in chapter 1.
Okay.
I just went down to the review. It's at the very bottom of chapter 1. Look up on the monitor. See over here?
Mm-hmm.
And over here is where you find the flashcards. Up at the top, each chapter has this, a chapter review, and it gives discussion questions. And if you scroll down to the bottom, it has the flashcards and key term flashcards.
I have the app and it just has a picture app.
Yeah. And same here. Before anything. Oh, what is that saying? Oh, yeah, okay. Woman food between the feelings. And I believe that is a quiz question. That one was needed. Woman seated between the feelings. Okay. So that's where your flashcards are. And then down here, key term flashcards. Oh, they updated that. For people who live by flashcards, but there you go. You are set. We'll jump back up here to section 2, not chapter 2.
Chapter review.
Oh, that's one. That's for a change. Okay, so section 2, the rise of agriculture and community in the Neolithic era. This is going to mirror the outline It just has all the details filled in between. Oh. And we're going to have you sit. The other class monitor was up high and I could stand. Okay.
Right.
Anyone have any questions? If you have any questions as we're going through, just go ahead and say, oh, the question.
I'm just trying to find that actually in on my deal. Is that? Oh, maybe I need to expand.
Click there.
Like just click on it. Okay.
And then
Oh, there it is.
down to go down.
Okay, right here.
Sorry, I had to play around with it last week a little bit. Learn my way around the new. No, there's switch on me. No. So the rise of agriculture and community in the Neolithic era. As we're going through this section, I'll be highlighting, or I'll try to highlight which questions will be on the quiz. Each section has a quiz. I think you all probably figured that out by now, huh? And I like it that they've added how many points each quiz is worth on this new format. And then it shows you also down there how much the chapter quiz is worth. To get started, I'm not going to read at you. Hi, Dwayne. Okay. Now I can make it bigger. Oh, Robert, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the ice begins covering the northern hemisphere, and it begins to recede around 10,000 BCE. Seas rise, and all of a sudden, the cave entrance at Cosper in southern France, filling what is now the North Sea and English Channel with water and inundating the land bridge that had connected Asia and North America. That's what I was just talking about, that land bridge, the Bering Strait, that was destroyed during a very powerful earthquake. I think about, don't quote me on that, maybe 100, 200 years ago. But up until then, people groups would cross over from Asia into North America. And that's how Native American Indians ended up in in North America. And by the way, I say Native American Indians because I've been here 15 years in Oklahoma, and I've been around people who are Native, who want to be called Native, or Native American, and I've been around people groups who want to be called American Indians. And the director of Muskogee Creek Nation, Kim Lynn Hummingbird, she's a good friend of mine, and I asked her one time, what do you prefer? And when I first moved here, I met her, and she said, I'm American Indian, my family's American Indian, my friends are American. So I thought, well, what do you say? So I just say Native American Indian. And I'm not having one person say, you know. So I try and work it all in, just say Native American Indian. All right, so the land bridge. Agriculture began to replace hunting and gathering. We talked about that. And that nomadic lifestyle gave way to a more sedentary way of life. I've been saying that word a lot the past week with COVID, sedentary. But people, nomads, used to move from place to place. But people started settling. Why? Because if you plant seed in the ground, you have to hang around for a bit for it to grow. And they figured that out. The ice covering begins to recede even farther and farther northward. As temperatures warm, life gradually changed. We know that. Hunters began to develop the bow and arrow as these grassy plains that didn't exist before now suddenly exist. They've got, wait, forests, plains, their ice is gone. How are we gonna hunt? How are we gonna capture these animals that are now running across the, bow and arrow. That's also a movie, Alpha. I know I'll keep eating that over there. Next week, I'm calling text, and next week we will have a DVD player in here. I guarantee you. All right, perhaps most important, people began to cultivate the edible grasses, planting squash and beans and corn. And when the Europeans came, they were like, they taught them how to plant that. So one of the quiz questions is going to ask you, or it's going to say the beginning of the Neolithic era coincided with what? And that response that it's looking for is that shift from that nomadic lifestyle to more of an agricultural community or activity. Agricultural production seems to have originated around 10,000 BCE in the Fertile Crescent, an area arching from southwest Iran across the foothills of Turkey, south into Lebanon. That's going to come up again next week when we talk about Mesopotamia, that Fertile Crescent, and I think also when we talk about Egypt. So where did these Neolithic agricultural societies begin to concentrate? In the great river valleys of the Middle East and Asia. And I like that next line that says, distinct centers of people involved in a common pursuit began to form. Again, what Robert said about trade. Trade began to happen. Civilizations develop when the environment of a region can support a large and productive population. An increasing population requires increased production of food and other goods, not only to support itself, but to trade for other commodities. Anybody ever done their DNA, their history in this room?
Sorry.
Oh, that sounds like a real tone.
I thought I had turned it off. Sorry.
Actually have a ringtone that's a real cool tone. Sounds like one of those phones from the 1980s.
Yeah.
That used to annoy me in my grandmother's house.
Yeah. But it has to be that way because it has to wake me up in the middle of the night.
Oh, okay. Any noise wakes me up in the middle of the night. It could be.
I'll sleep right by it if it's one of those small towns. So.
Okay, let's see. Increasing population requires increased production of food and other goods. Well, several years ago, speaking of, my great aunt and I, we did. Well, I had been doing our family history for at least 20 years, and then I met her, and she had all the information. We started doing it together, and worked with a genealogist who found my great 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 grandmother was born in Virginia to a Scottish plantation owner and a Native American mom, and she was mulatto. But it's interesting how when I did the family history of her father, Frederick William Grayson, it went all the way back to, I found him in Scotland. And he had come to the United States and settled in Dumfries, Virginia. He came from Dumfries, Scotland. And he had only an axe and a backpack, basically full of clothes. But he was standing on the edge of the Occoquan River, which is leads into the Potomac there in Virginia. And he had this idea as he was watching the ships coming in and out that, hey, they need food. Somebody has to supply them with food. So he had been a baker in Scotland, his family, and so he started making like crackers and dried goods and selling them to the people who were coming in and built a wealthy business out of it. Yes. And it was passed down and down. And when my great 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 grandmother moved away when she was 16 to Pittsburgh to get married, she started a baking business. And yes. So anyway, but it says there, they looked around and they saw the need and they thought, let's start meeting that need. All right. Okay, so as the climate warmed, I just looked at it.
Break time.
Well, let me finish this paragraph, and before we go to the next page, we'll go take a break. As the climate warmed, we know what happens. People start to want to travel more. Neolithic culture spread across Europe. They're taking cruises now. By about 5000 BCE, the valleys of Spain and France supported agriculture. But there's no evidence of farming in the northern reaches of the European continent and England dating back any earlier than 4000 BCE. The Neolithic era did not end in these colder climates. It continued in more remote regions such as Africa and the Americas well into the second millennia. Okay. Yes.
So I found that TV series I was talking
Oh, okay.
about. Now, I'm into martial arts, so that's why
Me
it's like
too.
flag me.
Me
And it's
too.
about the age of the
Did you say
samurai.
they're gonna flag you?
Well, no, Netflix. They're
Oh,
trying
I
to-
thought you meant TCC.
No, it was showing me, like, hey, you should watch this next, and I did, and so
I love
it
my.
was interesting, and it's called The Age of Samurai.
Yeah.
Yeah, Battle for Japan. So it really
Okay.
shows you the history of.
You need to share that with me, or at least type the name of it and send it to me.
Yeah,
You said the Age of Samurai of Japan?
yeah.
Okay.
So it goes through that whole era of the samurai in Japan. So
I
it was
always show.
interesting.
I always show clips
Yeah.
of the movie. Hold on, let me
It's
pause
pretty
this here.
gruesome too, but yeah, I don't care. Ah, let me get it. Yeah, any other time I wouldn't have watched it, but I'm like, oh, this is not too bad.
You know, if it's history, I always say is
Yeah, I
actually
like
rated
history,
X because
yeah.
you can't really show what happened. They can't recreate it.
Exactly. It's unethical. And I learned.
So everything is saying dated the 30th is what we need to focus on at this point.
You mean do?
Do.
Oh yeah, whatever's in that chapter, all those quizzes that are marked, quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, quiz 4. I think there are 4 sections.
Okay.
And then that chapter, it's all right there. That's the only thing that you need to take there. And then we'll be working on a pack back thing together this week, so everyone gets some experience just as practice.
Yeah, that's what's making me nervous. I'm anxious to get to that.
Oh yeah, why are you making me nervous?
Because I just.
This is like, I hear 27 degrees outside now. That's what you get nervous like. But, you know.
Questions, I guess I got to think about.
Yeah.
I learn how to deal with
Well, I had a student a few years ago. No, not a few, 2.
Mhm.
And he came in and said, oh, no. He said, no, I don't know this. I don't know about this. And I would ask like 2 or 3 part questions. And he said, why can't you just ask one question? I said, but I did. He said, no, there are 3 questions there. I said, well, it's 1 question. It's a 3-part question. He said, but it's still 3 questions. And so finally, there was a girl, Angela Hernandez, and she, like, on Packback, if you get a lot of stars, if it awards you a lot of stars, it moves you to the top. There's like a leaderboard.
Mhm.
And she's like, oh, I'm at the top of the leaderboard. And he said, what? What are you talking about? And she showed him, and he thought, oh, and it motivated him. So he started really, really working on his post. And he kept saying, I'm going to knock you off, Angela. I'm going to knock you off. And so they had that competition going. I was thinking, okay, guys, it's supposed to be fun.
Mhm.
And they said they were having fun.
Do the stars come from the classroom giving stars? Okay.
The stars come from
Yeah.
Packback sends me, it pulls certain posts and it sends it to me, and they say these are posts that are star worthy, and they don't send them to you guys because I think that would be mean. But
Yeah.
your post is star worthy. And I look at them and I go, but I also take other things into consideration because I don't grade like I'm in English literature. My English literature class, I would be a lot harder there. But you'll see Packback. It's just a fun program to do a lot of creative stuff with.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in front of the video for a
Don't
reason.
run, Tom, what you-
No, you go right ahead. Normally you can pause this thing, but it's not giving me the pause option here. So you're just gonna have to keep on running. Okay. Right now we are taking a break, so feel free to forward.
Oh, you're recording it?
Yes, I thought I've never recorded in the time that I've been here, but I thought,
I
well, we'll see.
actually like that, like, cause I did statistics last semester and it was through Zoom, and the instructor recorded the whole class, so it really helped when I got ready to do homework. I'm like, oh, how do we do that again?
Yeah, so thankfully this isn't statistics.
Yeah.
I would never be teaching a class on statistics.
Man,
I'm a qualitative person, not
it's
quantitative.
not math is not my thing, but I like the challenge. I like it. It's just
Yeah,
numbers.
I did not do well in math in school.
I do
And
decent. I do decent.
Well, I
I
didn't do
just-
well because I look back now and I realized I had lousy teachers.
Oh.
Yeah, I had very lousy teachers.
Yeah.
And
When you're a teacher yourself, you're like, oh, that's why I didn't do good.
well, I can now look back and see what they did and think I would never do that. I would
Yeah.
never treat my students that way. I would never. And
Things have
also,
changed over the years, I'll say that.
Mhm.
Things have changed over the years, I'll say that.
well, growing up in LA, in South
Oh, yeah, it's
Central,
definitely.
when it was South Central Los Angeles,
Yeah.
there were like 40 kids in a classroom.
Yeah.
It was so
I
crowded.
hear that, like.
The
in
teachers are
inner
just
cities-
trying to maintain control or not let them escape out the class.
Yeah, I
There was
saw-
no teaching going
I
on.
saw a documentary about, they're talking about how in schools like Los Angeles and inner cities, those students have a hard time learning because you gotta go to school, you gotta go through these metal detectors, and you gotta get frisked every so often, and it's just,
Well, I have a book out where I talk about that, and my cousin who raised me in LA, my cousin Denise, my cousin Denise said they had read the book, and Denise said, Rodney said, well, you think Tracy was raised in a war zone? And I said to Denise, yeah,
it's,
I
that's
was.
exactly how it is.
and I said to her, I said, it was different for you two because you were grown-ups,
Yeah,
and you got in the car and went to work. I said, I had to walk to school. My friends had to walk. I ran to school, ran home.
The gangs and stuff.
Yeah, you
going
had
on
drive-bys
around there, yeah.
outside of the school. You had school shootings before they were made the national news.
Yeah.
And you had, between the police and gangs, you didn't know who was going to try and take your life.
So how could you learn in a
The
environment like that?
anxiety, and I talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and generational PTSD because it happened.
Yeah.
And then, after I said that to her, you tell him, and I love him, he's like my best friend. But then an article just came out maybe a month ago, and it said, inner cities war zone, like environment causing post-traumatic stress disorder in children. And I said, there it is, and I sent in the article. I said, ha! See, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just what you said. I think that to, Webster, when I was over there for 3 years, and teachers would come in and say, they would talk about the students, they had a 51% of the students were Black, bused in from North Tulsa. And the other large percentage were students from West Tulsa who were white. And then you had small percentage of Native American Indian and Latino Hispanic. But the students who lived in West Tulsa, their environment had been decimated by meth.
Yeah.
And so many of those students' parents were in jail and they were in foster care. And then you had the students coming from North Tulsa who were dealing with gang-like situations. And these teachers were doing, this student, he's so lazy, he falls asleep all the time in class, and they would have these negatives. And I said, are you aware?
The stuff they go through.
That was me. I wanted to be anywhere but school because of the PTSD
Yeah.
that I was suffering from. I didn't want to be around people.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, are you at the guard base down the road?
Yes.
Oh, I've been on that base. Every time. For the PX. But I love I just love looking at the planes. Every now and then I bring my friends.
Yeah, they're not flying now, so that's why
Oh,
usually I have enough time to change for a loss.
that's okay. That's all right. Thank you for something. Anybody else know? Any cracks in here? Thank you. Okay, let's roll on through Neolithic communities. Okay, I can already see Gobekli Tepe, and I believe this is another one of our quiz questions. Yes, it is. Okay. The great rivers of the Middle East and Asia provided a consistent and predictable source of water, and the people soon developed irrigation techniques. So now they're learning ways to harvest the water to irrigate their crops. A production outgrew necessity, or as production. Members of the community were free to occupy themselves in other endeavors. Food prep, bread, cheese, and so on, construction, military affairs, and religion. What is believed to be one of the earliest of all religious sites is Gobekli Tepe, or Tepe, which sits atop a mountain ridge in southeastern Turkey. And now it's getting ready to quote this German archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, uncovered a ring of standing pillars. So he stumbled upon this worship site. And standing pillars, then a second, then a third. Today, at least 20 such rings have been discovered. Some of the tallest of the pillars in these rings stand 18 feet high and weigh 16 tons. He goes on to describe it as being covered in carvings of animals, vultures in particular. That's not something you see every day. The pillar illustrated here is decorated with a predatory animal, perhaps a leopard. The pillars are all made of limestone. The most surprising thing about the teepee is that evidently the people who built it did not live there. So they discovered that people didn't live in it. So it must have required hundreds of people to build each of the rings. Archaeologists estimate that it would have taken at least 500 people to move the pillars from local quarries. From Schmidt's point of view, and here I believe is your quiz question. Oh, at the very end here. In many ways, it may have served the same purpose as a Paleolithic cave, a place reserved for the ritual practices of the surrounding peoples. So it was that worship site that all the people would migrate to, not migrate, but go to at certain times of year. And it suggests that the development was religiously motivated. In Schmidt's words, first came the temple, then the city. So the quiz question says, what does Schmidt's assertion that first came the temple, then the city, explain about the structure found at the Gobekli Tepe in Turkey? And what it's looking for there is the reason the structure was not occupied by its builders. Explain about the structure. This is the reason the structure was not occupied by its builders. They built their temple first, then they began to build the city around the two. That is a picture there. That's so interesting. And more. Okay, moving on. Catahoula. Catahoula, and then Pottery. So this is the cave on Catahoula in central Turkey. We're still in Turkey. And it's talking in the first paragraph about a permanent village that began to take shape and lasted for about 1,200 years, with as many as 3,000 people living in close proximity to one another. And if you look at that, it talks about the houses standing side by side, one wall abutting the next, with entrances through the roof and down a ladder. The next paragraph, the Catahoula were apparently traders, principally of obsidian, a black volcanic and glass-like stone that could be carved into sharp blades and arrowheads. Down here, because it's going into detail. So what did they live in?
Rows of windowless houses.
Yes, I lost my place. I just looked at it.
Which rose to 16 feet.
What's this mud? Something about mud. Okay. Well, windowless houses composed the village. The walls rose as high as 16 feet, probably for defensive purposes. Their interior walls and floors were plastered and replastered and painted with white lime-based paint. Beneath the floors of some, but not all, of the houses were burials. And today we go, ooh, that's creepy. But that was a way of life back then. And from time to time, they noticed that the bodies were exhumed.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and reburied in new graves. Or in the foundations of new houses. Yes. Well, and they end it with whatever the rationale for such ceremonies. Yes. So, the people of Catahoula lived in houses made of basically mud bricks, is what it's looking for.
It's at the very top,
Thank you.
right below the 3,000, many as 3,000 people live in close proximity to one another.
Yes, I know I saw it. It just, I get sometimes like a dog with a bone. I will find it, and then I have to let it go. We look at that. Catahoula was first extensively excavated in 1958. And that's where he concluded that the culture was matrilineal. They discovered a number of female figurines, including a clay sculpture of a seated woman who represented a fertility or mother goddess. She sits enthroned between two felines, perhaps in the process of giving birth. And cats are very prominent in different cultures going back to this time period. Different kinds of cats, lions, different kinds of cats. I was reading something about Siamese cats. They were called Siamese. And I remember I found a Siamese cat when I was little. I was about 11 years old. and this is before I moved to LA, or I was sent to live in LA, but I was in West Virginia. And I took the cat home, and this cat took up residence on the banister by the door. And I, I think my mom ended up giving the cat away because nobody could come in the house. The cat would guard the house. People would walk up to the house and it would and slash at them. And it was like inerrant in this cat to do what Siamese cats were used for throughout history, to guard temples and palaces. But nobody told the cat. Nobody trained the cat. My cousin was out there screaming, "Come get your cat!" But the cat was like, I kind of like it. Okay, let's see. Next one. Trying. Talk a little more about artwork. So it's going to ask a question about this picture and the details on both the front and back of this artifact reinforce which theme. Let's see what we get there. Okay. God of Bra, Scotland. Preserved in the cold northern climate of Orkney Islands off the northern coast of Scotland is God of Bra. Some 4,000 years younger than Catahook, 4,000 years. Scarborough is a Neolithic village dating from between 3,100 to 2,600. The seaside village was apparently buried long ago under a layer of sand during a massive storm, and then in 1850 uncovered when another storm swept the sand away. The houses were made entirely of stone. And this goes back to the house that's being constructed with roofs made of organic material, what we talked about in at the beginning of class. The bed frames would have been filled with organic material such as heather or straw and covered with furs. The only light in the house, we'll talk about that. So here is a little replica here. It's not a replica, an actual big.
So that was the house.
Yes. In this and other houses, archaeologists have found some cooking pots, mortars for grinding grains, carved stone balls, bone tools used for fishing and sewing, and pottery. And again, here, looking at this layout, it's very similar. I asked if anyone has been, Virginia, did I say?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jamestown, Virginia, all over Virginia are people reenact what life was like in the early settlements of the 1600s and 1700s. They even have in Jamestown a dock where you can go and there's a replica of a slave ship, and they They recreated what it was like, and I thought, I've never been there, not once. That's just one of the places, like, I can pass on that one, I'll leave it to the other tourists. But there are other sites where it shows you how the villages were set up, and every time I look at this picture, it's like I'm walking through one of those um, sites in Virginia and how they set up the colonies. This is the last part. This is a long section. It's uncharacteristically long. Like, that last quiz question is going to ask us about the potter's wheel. It is a simple step from forming clay pots and firing them to modeling clay sculptural figures. Examples of clay modeling can be found in some of the earliest cave sites. And I don't even try and massacre some of the French words. But this man, an artist shaped 2 clay bison, each 2 feet long. Paleolithic sculptures were never fired. Some of the most interesting examples were the work of the so-called Nok people who lived in what is now Nigeria. They are identified by the name of the place where their artifacts were discovered. We know almost nothing about the Nok. We don't know how their culture was organized. They know nothing. But while most Neolithic peoples in Africa worked in materials that were not permanent, the Nok fired clay figures of animals and humans that were approximately life-size. These figurines were first unearthed in the early 20th century, early 1900s, by miners over an area of about 40 square miles. They did carbon dating on them, revealing that they went as far back as 800 BCE and others as late as 600 CE. Further to the east in the sub-Saharan regions of the Sudan, Egyptian culture had exerted considerable influence for centuries, and it may well be that Egyptian technological sophistication had worked its way westward. And this is an image, a Nok head. Very interesting. Yes. I do like this thing. The Neolithic megaliths of Northern Europe. Megaliths, go figure, big stones. Paleolithic, old stones. Stone architecture appears late in the Neolithic period, particularly in what is known now Britain and France. These big stones were constructed without the use of mortar and represent the most basic form of architectural construction. Sometimes they consisted merely of posts, from the Celtic word men, or stone, and here meaning long. The largest of the groups is at Carnac in Brittany. Yeah. There could be no doubt that megaliths were designed to be permanent structures, and they are still there. You can go, people tour these sites, especially Stonehenge. Domestic architecture was not meant to be permanent. Quite possibly, the megalith stood as a tribute to the strength of the leaders responsible for assembling and maintaining the considerable labor force required to construct them. Danielle, you mentioned that movie, and 2 semesters ago, we were going through a chapter, and it was talking about them finding a ship buried in the earth in, I think it might have been Scotland also, or England. It was England. And the student said, "Oh, they just made a movie about that." And I was, really? And it's called The Dig. And I said, that has to be one of the most boring movies probably ever. However, I watched it and I was captivated. It was so fascinating that I purchased it, and I showed it to my students, a little bit of it last semester. And it really is good. You feel free to jump ahead if you want to watch it. But when we get to that chapter, I thought that would make it very exciting. But it was exciting for me. Okay, moving down. The dolmen, well, it talks about some more megalithic structures. And if you're into architecture, very interesting. The dolmen. And here's an image of Stonehenge. A third type of megalithic structure, Stonehenge, the most famous structure in the world. It's 100 miles west of present-day London. A henge is a special type of cromlech, a circle surrounded by a ditch with built embankments for fortification purposes. And there it is. Look at that way.
Okay, I've seen that, but I just never knew what it was called.
Yes, notice that there are people, looks like people, does that look like people to you all? Like lining, I wonder where they park. We always think parking, and then the walk there, big picture. Okay, that's done. The site reflects 4 major building periods extending from 2750 to 1500 BCE. By about 2100 BCE, most of the elements visible today were in place. A continuous circle of sandstone posts, each weighing up to 50 tons, and all standing 20 feet high, surrounding the 5 trilithons. The design and making of Stonehenge. Okay, correct. All right, now we've finally made it to and we went past it, but I'll tell you, we'll come to it here. But the first breakthrough in technology during the Neolithic era relates to, and it's looking for the development of the potter's wheel as a mechanical process for producing goods. And we saw that especially with the knot. Okay, let's start. See what you all remember. So the beginning of the Neolithic era coincided with what? Anyone remember?
The shift from hunting to agricultural activity.
Yes. Oh, 2 tries. Man, I have to change that to 1. Just kidding.
Oh,
Sort of kidding.
gosh. So far, though, that-
Okay. Yes, very good. Thank you. All right. Okay, now you're out. And that's a good one. That's not like a demerit. That's what you are. You're out. Okay. Okay, you three. Let's see. What does archaeologist Klaus Schmidt assertion that first came the temple, then the city, explain about the structure of the teepee at Turkey?
Its method of construction.
Well, he said what first? He said, first came the temple, then the city.
The method of construction.
Method of
Okay,
construction.
Danielle says method of
Outside.
construction. Do you all concur?
I concur.
Okay, Robert, do you concur?
I concur.
You don't concur?
I do.
No, I'm sorry. Bernard?
Bryce.
Bryce. What's your last name?
Irvin.
Oh, I probably switched them together. Bryce, you're shaking your head no.
They
What?
talked about how it was not the reason it wasn't occupied by its buildings.
Yes, there you go. The reason the structure was not
Oh,
occupied by.
I remember now when you said that.
That's okay.
I remember you
all
saying that
learning
it was built the temple outside and the houses.
Yes,
were
they built the
inside.
temple first, then they
Then,
started to build the
yeah.
city around the temple. There you go.
Around the
Hey, we can all be wrong together. Okay, next question. That's why I like to do this with you. The people of Catahook lived in houses made of.
D.
Aha, Robert's all over it.
Remember that.
Wait, you said D.
D.
Yeah.
Mud
That
bricks.
they don't letter them or number them. Okay, wonderful. Good job. All right. So here it shows us the image of this woman sitting between two figurines or felines. Details on both the front and back of this artifact reinforce which theme. So this is a little tricky. I wasn't sure which figure it was referring to. So let's see. We can't see. Let me see if it will show us the back. Okay, I'll help you all out. The details, there are details on the front and the back of this artifact which reinforce their belief in the duality of life and death.
Other female.
Yes, embodied by the female. I don't know. Sorry, this has never occurred to me before, but a thought jumped in my head at that last slide where you've heard it said, or mom saying, you know, I brought you in this world, I can take you out. Life and death is in the power.
I've heard that before.
Yes. Cosby Show.
Yeah.
But mom said, brought you in this world. Okay, last one. The first breakthrough in technology during this era relates to.
Would it be the development of the potter's wheel and mechanical process of production goods?
Yes. Yes. Muy bueno. All right, good job. Hopefully you all got the same. And then if you hit summary when you're done with it, it should show you summary. Now, if you're taking this quiz or even the chapter quiz and you miss one, you do have a chance to, answer the question again and get it right. It does deduct a certain percentage, and I think it may tell you that in the grade book if you click in your grade book.
So once you're done, you hit review, I guess it just kind of, is that what you're talking about?
You can,
Okay.
if you want to go back over and see what those answers are. Well, what I want to do now is I want to take a look at Packback, and then after we do that, then I'll go ahead and let you all go for the night, if that's okay. I want to make sure
Yep.
those are getting the money's worth.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
I'm always very conscious of that. I paid my way through everything. I was like, I don't want my money.
I don't think nobody in here is gonna have a problem with that. If they do, they can sit outside and talk to me. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
And give him some multiple choice questions.
Yeah, give them some multiple choice questions. I don't think
Okay.
Bryce was here when I said that. Oh, yeah?
Okay, so now you have those three sections left. They're shorter sections. But hopefully, yes, they are definitely shorter. Yay.
But on,
Hmm?
Revel, it's the assignments are coming up. It's saying that it's not assigned to me, but particular. Alright,
Let me.
Yeah, I did that on mine earlier when I looked at it too.
yeah, I don't think it's set up for us to, it's not.
I just felt that it was,
Should be. Let me, I took it off there, so. Settings. Okay, so Michael and Bryce gone through. You took your quizzes. Robert, was it not letting you in?
it was.
It was? Did you take your quiz?
That one.
Oh, okay. That's what was throwing me off because it was saying 0%. That's fine. That's word I wanted to see. Okay. All right. And then, let me see. Danielle, I would, in the morning, or if you have time tomorrow, at some point, call that customer service now. Yeah, for Rebel.
Okay.
Yes, or shoot them an email. Normally they get right back to you. Get them on the phone already. I took a chance today to call because I use the same program I found nice. And I thought, oh, let me call them and see how long I'll be on. They answered right away and fixed that issue. And I was like, what? So hopefully you'll have that and ask them why can I not access it? Because it says purchase and it says active. I don't know why you shouldn't be able to.
Well, the note that came up said that it wasn't assigned yet to me, but,
Yeah.
okay, I'll call them. Oh,
Yeah, I know.
call them tonight.
One more moment. I'll also look again tomorrow and I'll shoot her an email and ask, hopefully it's really good stuff.
Did you actually fly?
No.
Did you fly planes up to us? I know they're going in the Air Force actually fly
No.
planes. But many people are under that impression because Air Force.
Right,
They know everything a lot of people do is in support of it.
right.
I've flew on many planes, but I wasn't at the helm. That would be maybe the helm.
Yeah, I knew a few people that was in the Air Force and they didn't fly either. Support.
Okay, let me put it back on the monitor here.
I heard it.
It's like it's paddling. Okay, so pack back. This is a program, yes, you can blame me. Some of you are new. Robert, have you seen this program used in any other classes?
This is my first time.
Okay,
Is this part right here supposed to be here? Dr. Lewis? So it's like I'm missing half of it, you know?
And if you scroll up, you can hide that menu.
Oh, you're right there, the X. Okay,
X marks the spot.
yeah.
I started using this program about maybe 2.5 years ago. There was someone in some part of TCC who was talking to me about, hey, would you like to pilot this program for TCC and see how it works? I said, sure. And I loved it. And so I used it, I pushed it. TCC finally bought it and purchased it for the start of this semester. And for all classes, if the professor wants to use it. If you do struggle with writing, it's a great tool to help you. It gives you a lot of tips. I need to make this a little smaller. Sit down. So first off, has anyone gone in and created, let's see what's in here.
I have.
Details. Okay, yes, Danielle has created her avatar. Robert, Bryce, Sylvia, Michael. So everyone in this room is in there. Yes, wonderful. Okay. So now I'll show you. I'm not sure, like I said, if we'll do it each week. We'll definitely do it next week. But this week is a practice week. So I posted a question last week because I was just excited. And it's a little different, so I'm trying to do. This is that learner leaderboard. I'm not on the leaderboard. I won't be on the leaderboard. I just posted mine at the top so you guys can see it. But I shouldn't be in competition with you guys, so don't worry about that. This is just me posting a model question. Oh, here we go. So a lot of features to this. I'm trying to think where to start. So I went in and posted this question. I was clicking around, but it's much easier than that. On the initial page, there was that big red strip that said, ask question. That's where you're going to go to. You're going to click on that and post your question. I was just looking to get to my question. So I went in last week and I posted this question that says, what do you consider one of the most significant events in world history? And normally our questions will be related to our chapters, what we talked about in our chapters. So I was trying to think of a question that just involved world history and didn't relate to chapter 1 so much. So let me ask you all, what do you consider one of the most significant events in world history? I have the hardest time sitting down. I do not do well sitting down. But I'm gonna have to, the structure is just weird. So, anybody?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor.
Cold War.
Yes, the Cold War. Yes. Have you seen Bridge?
Bridge of Spies.
Yes, Bridge of
Tom
Spies.
Hanks.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
My goodness, you saw that? Yeah. And you said the Holocaust. Yes. What interesting. I'm hitting D-Day and from VE Day. You said Pearl Harbor. You said the Holocaust.
I'd say the Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire. Yes. And there are 2 chapters on Rome in this book that tells you something. There are 2 chapters on Greece. There are 2 chapters on Rome, 2 chapters on Christianity that in Rome that shows you just the impact that those cultures had on the entire world. But Greece and Rome, especially, you had Alexander the Great, and then after he died, the Greeks were conquered by Rome. And I love it when we get to those chapters because I love Greek anything, and I love studying that. But Rome, yeah, very interesting to compare those 2 societies and why one thrived and why one was conquerable. But many civilizations studied Rome, and learned from Rome. It shaped our society today. Greece shaped our society in terms of medicine and education, but Rome shaped our society in terms of building and public works and the law and just some politics. My goodness, Democrats and Republicans, they started that, but they started that. But they got bloody with it. They were stabbing people to death.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you in office. They took it to a whole nother level. But anyway, so when you're doing a post here, you come up with a question, and Michael mentioned open-ended questions. Open-ended questions. It's just something that you have to put a question mark at the end. Like if I flip this question around and I said, VE Day was one of the most significant events in world history, then it's just a statement, right? But if you flip it around and make it a question, now it's open-ended. So I always say this, you start with your question, and when you write your question, I'll show you that in a moment, it's going to give you some tips on the right and tell you whether you're getting close or whether your question is good or whether you need to reword it. And it's not mean about it either. And then you can add a picture. I always add the picture last because it ups your points. If you add a link inside of your post, you up your points. So once you create your question, then you have to add some details. Give it some facts and some details. Down here, you have to cite your source. If you don't cite your source, then your points are going to be lower. So I got a 72. That's my points. I'm okay with that because I wasn't trying my hardest, I was like, I just wanted to get something on here. But you can I was telling Michael, or I was telling someone about the competition between the 2 students about a year ago. And they were up in the 90s there, those 2. They were just kind of like, everybody else was like, hey, I'm just going to get my post on there and get my 70 points. But those 2, they were going at it in a healthy competition kind of way. Like, I'm going to get you, Angel. I'm going to get you. And, yeah, they were up in the 90s in terms of their points. But it raised everyone's bar. And everybody was like, I can add this. I'm going to add some more bells and whistles to my post. So now let's go back over to, not my file, the community board. Back to the, okay, so there we are with the little big red strip, or the big red strip that says ask a new question. So let's go in here and I'll show you. This is what's going to come up. So next week when I say, okay, we're going to be talking about Mesopotamia and some other cultures that made up Mesopotamia, or excuse me, some of the cultures that made up Mesopotamia. And we'll come up with a question or I will, and I can post my question, but everyone is gonna have, sometimes we'll all have the same question, but that's boring. Most of the time, we all have to create our own question, because I don't think like you, and you don't think like me, and we can create our own question.
So do every question requires I think a citing or what you said, is that what you said? Cite?
To cite your source.
Yeah, yeah. So does
At
every,
the bottom, but let's build it out. Somebody come up with a question maybe related to this chapter or this section that we just went through.
Why, okay, in the beginning of the chapter, it stated that the drawings on the cave walls, they started to deteriorate because of the carbon dioxide from their breath. So why is that?
Okay, so why does carbon, hey, I take hints, so, for help, so if you want to have me add something, feel free to jump in. Why does carbon dioxide cause cave walls to deteriorate?
Well, they
This
said
is not
the-
my specialty,
They
so
said
help
the
me.
drawings, not the walls.
Okay, the
the
cave,
drawings,
the
yeah.
drawing on the cave walls,
Actually, what's the name of that cave?
show low.
Yeah, that cave, yeah.
Oh, yay, or something like that. No offense to. Why did carbon dioxide cause the drawings on the cave walls of, yes, it's here.
It's LASCAUX.
Oh,
Cave.
LASCAUS,
Mhm.
the cause?
No, the cave. With the
Oh. Oh, cave. CAUX, okay. That look right? Deteriorate,
Yeah.
deteriorate. Question mark. Why did carbon dioxide cause the drawings on the walls of caves to deteriorate? I can read a little French, but I cannot see. Okay, so see how this pops up? Here are some tips for writing that it gives you on the right. And notice how it's saying, keep going. Our owl needs at least 20 words to analyze and provide feedback. It doesn't need at least 20 words in your question. It wants it down
In
here.
the description.
And it's already telling you there. That's so hard to see. I apologize. I can apologize and I'll mess with this monitor.
I think it's the
Even in
light.
and out. Yes. So right here, it provides you with some feedback on your question. Now, if you don't write an open-ended question, it'll say, hey, you need an open-ended question. And over there on the right, it'll give you some tips. It helps you out. It's a nice program. And so now it says, great, now add a description to make your question really interesting. So when we come down here to this part,
That's where you would want to add a picture or.
yes, but first you want to add your details, some facts. So what is something that we can write here to explain our question?
Oh, the cave was discovered in 1940.
It was discovered, yes. In 1940?
Yes.
Now, what's something about the carbon dioxide?
when they start having the visitors, I think it was at I think
It
about
contributed to growth of bacteria and mold.
Form on the wall. Okay, it's not flagging me yet. But look over here to the right at what's happening. Kind of hard to see.
Oh, it's giving me scores.
Duh.
yeah.
Duh, me, not you.
Who is this?
Okay, can you see a little better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so over here on the right, it's giving you some feedback. So it likes our convention, meaning our grammar is good. Conventions means how you're putting sentences together. The words you're using stand in the same verb tense, past tense. Um, Over here, communication is like, okay, we like what you're saying. Give us a little more. Credible, like it's not sure if it believes us or not yet. When we cite our
That's what I'm
source,
excited.
yes, exactly. It makes it more credible. Like, well, this is all you right now. This is evaluation. These are our thoughts on the matter until we put that source in.
So let me ask a question.
Mhm.
So when you cite your source, does it have kind of like a outline or a format where you can just put your source in?
Mhm.
Oh, there. Okay.
I have a sample for you in my email, I believe,
So
to show you how to do MLA format.
okay.
And
So-
it's really easy. You do it once and it hasn't changed really over the past 30 years. Just a letter here and there or a number.
So I guess I was thinking, like, if I remember correctly, back when I used to write papers, um, in Word, it has the format. You can just put in MLA, and then you click on the.
Yes, and I don't know, Google has that feature, Google Docs, but I'm a Microsoft kid. I love Microsoft. I deal with Google, but I love Microsoft. But also, a lot of sources that you go to online already have it for you. If you look down at the bottom on the right or left, they'll say cite the source, and they already have it filled out. All you have to do is copy
That's
and
what
paste.
I do.
Yes. So let's do this. Now, Danielle was pulling from the book, which is great. But let's go out and let's look for a source and say, what effect does carbon dioxide have on cave wall or painting? Cave wall painting. And let's see what it says. Ta-da! Oh, and look what comes up. Is it spying on us? Chauvet cave wall painting with horses.
Is this on Google?
Yes,
Okay.
it's all. No, this is Bing. Ooh, sorry. I'm sorry, Bing. All right, so I'm going to click on this source and open it up.
Mhm.
And, oh, okay, looky here. Let's go down here and see what it has to say about carbon dioxide. Let me put it down. Well, so control F. Yes, sorry. My brain's moving a little slow tonight, folks, sorry. So, carbon dioxide. There you go. If you go up and hit Control F, and it usually happens on any screen, you can put your word in and it'll take you right to it. So, near toxic levels. So I am going to highlight this. I'm going to hit copy, and I always like to kind of look up top to see what site is this. Okay. So I'll have to do the reconstruction of my MLA format. Okay, so now I've got a quote that backs up what we're talking about in terms of carbon dioxide. So you guys said after visitors were allowed entrance, bacteria and mold started to form on the walls. So that article we read was talking about now. So I'm going to say,
Control V.
an article by that Liddy. An article by that look right?
Yep.
Okay.
L-I-D-Y.
Is it L-I-D?
Is it L-I-D-Y? L-I-D-I-Y. Okay.
Liddy states that today, and then I'm going to put quotations around. I don't need that. And then I'm going to put quotations there. And this is no name, I don't think, associated with this. I don't see a person who is the author of this article, so I'm just going to go with that Liddy or Weebly. Weebly. And if there was a date, you could put a comma in there and put the date. But oh yeah, there we go, 2017. Now, another way you can do that and spare yourself putting it in quotes is just to paraphrase it. Anybody know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, put it in your own words. That today, how would you paraphrase that?
An article by this person states that today, you just kind of paraphrase the quote.
Well, if you put that article, you would have to put the citing in.
Yeah.
But this is what's called an in-text citation.
You
Take
don't
that
have
bold
to
off.
just eliminate the quote altogether and then just put it in your own.
Put it in your own
summary of
words.
What the quote said.
That's a little difficult because it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Like they already did it, kind of. So we'll leave it there in quotes, but you feel free to paraphrase. But even if you paraphrase, unless you take from one source, another source, and you combine them all together, then you don't have to put cite a source. But if you take it from one source and you paraphrase it, you still want to cite the source.
So if you added a picture on the bottom of it, would that take the credibility up or the?
Well, let's close this out
Okay.
with an end statement here, or a concluding sentence. We can say something like, still, many visitors flock to
The bold is still on.
to the site. That may serve well right now. Flock to the site each year. See if it's, how is it doing on credibility?
Well, now, isn't that why they got to build the replica?
The replica, yeah.
So that way they don't go
I would
fast.
just, yeah,
To see the replica?
yeah.
Okay, so our convention is still good. Communication, curiosity, now, it you made me curious, we made it curious. Credibility, now down here is where you put the source in MLA format. And let's see, that's an interesting source, so you go with what you have. We have a date, we have the title, and we've got the website. If there's no author, then you put the name of I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's a website, if it's someone's name. I do not know. So we're going to put that first. So that's going to go here. So, and then you put a period after that, because that's your source, or the publisher of the source. And then you want to put the name of the article, Chauvet Cave Wall Painting with Horses. And then I'm going to keep it simple here and say retrieve on, what's our date today? January 24th, 2022. From, you go up here. Websites are easy, by the way.
Yeah.
Websites are easy to cite.
One of those little generators.
Yeah, those do exist, but I've been doing it so long. Okay, so did you notice what happened to the credibility over here?
Mhm.
It went all the way around because it was sitting there saying, well, you're telling me this, but prove it. Once I put that source in there, then yeah. Oh, we have an 86 collectively as a class. Yes. And now, what Michael had asked, we can add a picture. So I like to go over here and you can find any picture, and if you right click and it says save image as, I know that's backwards. It downloads, then I'll go back over here. This usually goes a lot faster than what I'm going. You can add an image from the web. You can add an image from upload an image. You can add a video link. Or you can add a link to the website. You can do that also. But I'm going to upload that picture from, oh, yeah, I know. Anyway, thanks, Dana. I'm distracted. Okay, so, what already said it? Okay, so it puts it there above the, and it really likes that. It's still not that curious, but that's okay.
What about it says one alert, what is that?
Okay, yes, let's see. Well, there aren't any, wait. I'm saying one alert, but it's not letting us click on it,
Is
so,
it frozen?
no. It's just, maybe it's not that serious.
In these cases, curiosity is not very high. Oh,
Oh, grammatical errors. No. They're supposed to be. Did you mean like Google? I think
Hate
that's
when
it.
it does that.
Okay, add a more detailed description. We're going to stay with that one for now because it's practice. Credibility, great job. Citing the source, communication. Title's just right. Convention. Be sure to cite and quote your sources carefully before submitting. And it'll give you that feedback after you post. And if it does say, hey, plagiarism here, go back in and correct it. You can go down here and you can, well, once you submit it, you can hit options, which will give you the option to edit it. Okay, I think I was going to put one more thing here. And that's, I was thinking of putting, copy link, yeah, to this image here. And let's see what it does. Oh, wrong button.
Mhm.
It's on there.
It said, it's saying that they did stencils of hands, where they painted over people's hands and with the stencil. It talked about.
Thank
it in
you.
the
So we'll
textbook.
just call it stencils of hands. See if it works. Okay. make it a little more curious. Okay, now we're gonna post it and call it done. Okay. All right, so that was a practice there, and collectively, we scored a 70. And here are the options is where you can go in and edit your response. What I want you all to play with this week is just go in there and practice either responding, because when we do this, it'll be on the lesson plan whether or not we have a pack-back question. You'll need to post a question like we just did, and that's 25 points. And then you have to respond to 2 student posts. And each response is 12.5 posts. Each week, the grade, or when we do a pack-back, it'll be worth 50 total points. 25 for your questions and 2 for your responses. If you respond to 3 questions, that's bonus. You get the, yeah. So for those of you who like bonus or maybe need bonus, respond to 3. Yeah. And it'll determine how many points your post is worth and add that to your score for the week. All right. So, all right. Looks promising. Like I said, I'm not going to, I just want you to go in and practice this week. Try posting something, okay? Question, and practice that. And then next week I'll give you points for participation if you post something. And then next week we'll do it for real. So you all are dismissed.
So we can just post anything, just something related to.
Yes, the chapter.
Just
It
chapter.
doesn't even have to be the caves, because we just did that section. It could be any section, a cave question related to it. You guys are a fun group. Thank you. Here. Learning should be.